We planned the whole thing like idiots. 4 friends, 1 abandoned hospital, 3 cameras, and a stupid promise that we'd stay inside until sunrise no matter what happened. At the time, it sounded fun. Daniel was the one who found the place online. He sent us an old article about St. Mercy Hospital around midnight, while we were all in a group call. The article said the building had been abandoned for over 15 years after several patients mysteriously disappeared during the same month. No bodies were ever found. The hospital shut down soon after. People in town believed the place was cursed, which of course made us want to go even more. Chris kept joking about becoming famous overnight if we caught a ghost on camera. Mia wasn't fully comfortable with it, but she didn't want to stay behind alone either. And me? I honestly didn't believe in ghosts back then. I thought every creepy story had a logical explanation. Old buildings make noises. Darkness plays tricks on your mind, that's all. At least, that's what I believed before that night. We left around 2:15 a.m. in Daniel's truck. The roads were empty. Streetlights became rarer the farther we drove. After almost 40 minutes, we reached the edge of town where the hospital sat hidden behind dead trees and broken fences. The first thing I noticed was how huge it looked. Pictures online didn't show its real size. The building towered over us like some giant shadow waiting in the dark. Half the windows were broken. Parts of the roof had collapsed. The old hospital sign creaked slowly in the wind. St. Mercy Hospital. The letters were faded, barely readable. Mia looked at the building and immediately said, "I don't like this place." Chris laughed. "Good, that's the whole point." But even he sounded nervous. The air felt strange there. Too quiet, no insects. No distant traffic. Nothing. Just silence. I grabbed my camera bag while Daniel parked near the entrance gate. The gravel under our shoes sounded way too loud as we walked closer. Every step echoed through the empty parking lot. That's when we noticed the front doors. They were already open. Not wide open. Just enough for someone to slip inside. We all stopped walking. Daniel frowned. "That's weird. Maybe other explorers came here before us," Chris said, but his voice was lower now. I remember staring at that dark opening between the doors. It looked less like an entrance and more like a mouth waiting for us. Something in my gut told me to leave, but none of us wanted to look scared in front of the others. So we kept going. The moment we stepped inside, the smell hit us first. Dust, mold, rotting wood. The air felt thick and damp, like the building had been sealed shut for decades. Our flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing cracked floors and peeling walls covered in stains. Wheelchairs sat abandoned near the reception desk. Patient files were scattered everywhere. One of the ceiling lights swung slowly back and forth, even though there was no wind inside. Chris lifted his camera and whispered dramatically, "Welcome to hell!" Usually we would laugh at stuff like that. This time, nobody did. Our footsteps echoed loudly through the lobby. As we moved deeper inside, every sound felt amplified. Even breathing sounded wrong in that place. Daniel kept filming everything, while talking to the camera like some ghost-hunting host. Time is exactly 3:02 a.m. We're inside St. Mercy Hospital, abandoned since 2011. Rumors say people still hear voices in here at night. Stop saying stuff like that. Mia snapped quietly. "She's already scared." Chris teased. "I'm not scared," she said immediately, but she stayed very close to me after that. The hospital felt endless. Hallways stretched in every direction. Doors hung half open. Old medical equipment sat covered in dust sheets that looked almost human in the dark. Then my flashlight flickered. Just once. But it was enough to make my chest tighten. "You guys see that?" I asked. "Probably old batteries," Daniel replied. "They're new," I said. Chris suddenly pointed toward the hallway ahead. "Yo." "What's that?" We all turned fast. At the far end of the corridor, something moved, not clearly. Just a dark shape crossing from one room to another. For a second, nobody spoke. Then Chris forced a laugh. "Probably an animal," thought, but nobody went to check. We continued walking anyway, pretending not to think about it. The temperature kept dropping the farther we went. I could actually see my breath at one point. Mia rubbed her arms and whispered, "Why is it freezing in here?" No one answered. Then we heard the sound, a metallic bang somewhere upstairs. All four of us froze instantly. Another bang followed, louder this time, like a door slamming shut. Chris whispered, "Okay, tell me you guys heard that too." Thought before anyone could answer, we heard something else. Footsteps, slow footsteps. Above us, one step at a time. Cree, cree, cree. The sound moved directly over our heads, like someone was walking across the second floor, following us. Mia grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. "There's someone in here." Daniel tried to act calm, but I saw fear on his face for the first time. Probably homeless people. But deep down, we all knew something wasn't right, because the footsteps suddenly stopped. And right after they stopped, we heard a woman whisper very softly somewhere behind us. "Help me." The whisper came from so close behind us that my entire body locked up. "Help me." Soft, weak, like someone struggling to breathe. We spun around instantly, our flashlight beams shaking across the walls. The hallway behind us was empty. Just cracked paint, broken doors, and darkness stretching deeper into the hospital. Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed. Nobody even breathed. Chris was the first to speak. "Okay, nah, somebody's messing with us." But his voice cracked when he said it. Mia looked there. "Right now." Her face had completely lost color. "We need to leave." Daniel shook his head quickly, trying too hard to stay calm. "Relax. It's probably another group in here." "At 3 a.m.? I asked. No one answered that. Then the whisper came again, this time from farther away. "Help me." The sound echoed down the corridor like it was moving through the walls themselves. It didn't sound human anymore. There was something wrong with the voice, like multiple people whispering together at the same time. Chris slowly lowered his camera. "You guys hear that weird echo?" I nodded without taking my eyes off the hallway. The air suddenly felt freezing cold, not normal cold, the kind that crawls into your chest and makes your stomach tighten. My flashlight flickered again, this time longer. For 1 second, everything went dark, and in that single second, I heard footsteps running toward us. Fast, heavy, right outside the darkness. My flashlight came back on instantly, and the hallway was empty again. I almost dropped the camera. "Did you hear that?" I shouted. "Hear what?" Daniel asked, immediately. "Someone just ran at us!" "No one ran," Chris said, but he didn't sound convinced. Mia grabbed my sleeve harder. I heard it too. That's when Daniel noticed a nearby door, slightly open on the left side of the corridor. A small sign above it read, "Patient Archives." The room beyond was pitch black. "Let's check in there," Daniel whispered. "Why would we do that?" Mia snapped. "Because if someone's inside, we need to know." Honestly, none of us wanted to go in there. But standing in the hallway felt even worse, like something was watching us from the dark corners. So we pushed the door open. The smell inside nearly made me gag. Old paper, dust, something rotten underneath it. Our flashlights revealed thousands of files scattered across the floor. Cabinets lined every wall, many tipped over and broken open. Water stains spread across the ceiling like dark veins. Chris muttered, "This place is disgusting." But the weirdest part wasn't the room itself. It was the silence. The whispers had stopped completely the moment we entered. No footsteps, no sounds, nothing. Almost like the building was listening to us now. Daniel crouched near a pile of files and picked one up. "Look at these dates," he said quietly. "Some of these are from the 70s. I walked farther into the room, carefully stepping over papers. Most of the files were ruined from water damage, but a few names were still visible. Patient histories, medical reports, psych evaluations. Mia suddenly froze near one of the cabinets. "Guys," something in her voice made my chest tighten instantly. "What?" I asked. She pointed her flashlight toward the far wall. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. Then my brain caught up. Messages. Hundreds of messages scratched into the wall. Some looked old. Others looked fresh. "Help me. Don't let them take me. They watch from below." He is still here. The scratches covered the entire wall from floor to ceiling. Chris nervously laughed again, but it sounded fake. Okay, somebody definitely made this for attention. No, Mia whispered. Look closer. I stepped nearer and felt my stomach drop. The scratches weren't random. They were made with fingernails, long, deep marks, dragged to the paint like someone had clawed the wall until their fingers bled. Then Daniel stopped moving, completely. I turned toward him. He was staring at a single patient file in his hands. Daniel, I said. No response. His face had gone pale again. Bro, what is it? Chris asked. Very slowly. Daniel lifted the file toward us. The room suddenly felt smaller, because written across the top of the file, in faded black ink, was his full name. Daniel Harper. None of us spoke. I walked over and grabbed the file from his shaking hands. Inside were medical notes, dates, evaluations, and a patient photo. Daniel stumbled backward immediately. No. No. The picture looked exactly like him. Same face, same eyes, same scar above his eyebrow. Except the photo was old and damaged, like it had been sitting there for years. Chris snatched the file from me. This has to be fake. Then his expression changed too. Because underneath Daniel's file were 3 more. 1 for Mia, 1 for Chris, and 1 for me. My hands started trembling before I even opened mine. I didn't want to look, but I did anyway. The moment I saw my own name typed across that paper, my entire body went numb. The file described me perfectly. Age, height, even details. Nobody should have known. Patient displays signs of anxiety when exposed to darkness. I had never told anyone that fear before. Ever.M. IA was crying now. How is this possible? Chris kept flipping through the pages faster and faster like he was trying to find a joke hidden somewhere. Then he suddenly stopped. Guys. His voice barely worked. At the bottom of every file was the same sentence. Subject scheduled for admission. May 8th, 2026 today's date. Right as we realized that. The lights above us flickered once. Every cabinet in the room rattled violently, and somewhere deep below the floor, we heard an elevator bell ring. Ding! The elevator bell echoed through the hospital like a gunshot. Ding! Every single one of us jumped. The sound came from somewhere below us, deep inside the building. Not upstairs, not nearby. Below. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. We just stared at each other, while the old files shook slightly in our hands. Then came the sound of metal grinding. The elevator was moving. You hear that? Chris whispered. Of course we heard it. The noise echoed through the walls like giant gears waking up after years of silence. Slow, heavy, ancient, but the hospital had no power. That was impossible. Mia backed away from the files immediately. We need to leave right now. Dofo ao. NCE. Nobody argued with her. Daniel quickly grabbed his camera while I shoved the patient files back onto the floor. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to get out of that building. But the moment we reached the archives room door, it slammed shut by itself. Bang. Mia screamed. Chris immediately rushed forward and grabbed the handle. It's stuck. What do you mean stuck? What do you mean stuck? I shouted. It won't open. All 4 of us crowded around the door, pulling and yanking at it in panic. It didn't move even an inch. Then the whispering started again. This time it surrounded us. Not one voice. Dozens. Soft whispers leaking through the walls, ceiling, floor, everywhere. Help me. Don't go down there. He's awake. The voices overlapped in different tones and directions. Some sounded old. Others sounded like children. Mia covered her ears and started crying. Stop it. Stop it. I felt my chest tightening hard now. The room suddenly seemed darker than before, even with our flashlights on. Then something banged from inside, one of the filing cabinets behind us. Loud. All of us spun around instantly. Bang. Another hit, like something too wrapped inside was trying to get out. Chris whispered, Nope. I'm done. The cabinet door slowly creaked open by itself. Nothing was inside. At least, that's what I thought at first. Then I noticed the darkness inside the cabinet moving. Not physically moving. Not physically moving. Breathing. The shadows inside looked deeper than normal darkness. Almost alive. And right in the center of it, two pale eyes opened. I stumbled backward so hard I nearly fell. "Did you see that?" I yelled. But before anyone answered, the archive room lights suddenly flashed bright white for half a second. And in that flash, we saw people standing around us. Patients. At least 20 of them. Thin figures in old hospital gowns covered every corner of the room. Their faces looked hollow, empty. Some had their mouths hanging open unnaturally wide. One woman stood inches away from Mia. Then the lights died again instantly. Darkness swallowed everything. Mia screamed louder than I've ever heard a person scream before. Our flashlight beam shot wildly around the room. Nobody was there anymore. The room was empty again. Chris started hyperventilating. "We're leaving. Right now. I don't care how. Dan." IEL finally forced the door open with a hard shoulder slam, and we nearly fell into the hallway together. The second we got outside the archive room, the whispers stopped. Complete silence. But somehow, that silence felt even worse. We ran through the corridor fast, barely paying attention to where we were going. The hospital felt different now. Like it knew we had seen something we weren't supposed to see. Our footsteps echoed violently through the halls. Then we heard another sound. Ding. Closer this time. The elevator. We turned the corner and saw it at the end of the hallway. The elevator doors were open. A dim red emergency light glowed inside the cabin, barely lighting the rusted walls. The hospital around it remained completely dark. The elevator shouldn't have been working. Hell, it shouldn't even have power. Yet there it was, waiting. None of us moved closer. I noticed the floor indicator above the doors. B1 basement level. The button panel beside the elevator flickered weakly. Every floor button was dead, except one. Basement. Chris whispered. "Tell me... We're not going down there? We're not," Mia said immediately. But Daniel kept staring at the L. Ivatora. Almost hypnotized. "Guys," he said quietly, "look at this." He pointed his flashlight toward the floor inside the elevator. There were wet footprints. Bare human footprints. Fresh. Leading out of the elevator and into the hallway where we stood. My stomach dropped instantly, because we hadn't noticed them before. The footprints disappeared around the corner behind us, as if someone had quietly walked past while we were distracted. Mia turned pale again. Something came out of there. Right then, we heard it. A child laughing somewhere far below us. Very faint, very distant. Coming from inside the elevator shaft, Chris stepped backward fast. Absolutely not. Then the elevator doors suddenly slammed shut. Bang. All of us jumped. A second later, the elevator began moving upward. Floor numbers flickered above the door. B1, 1, 2, 3. The hospital groaned around us as the elevator climbed higher and higher on its own. Then it stopped. More 5. We stared upward into the darkness above us. That's when we heard screaming. Not normal screaming. Pure terror. A man's voice yelling from the 5th floor somewhere directly above us. "Get out!" The scream. M echoed through the entire hospital. Then came running footsteps. Fast footsteps pounding across the ceiling over our heads. Something was sprinting up there. Not one thing at all. Multiple things. Mia grabbed my arm hard again. "We're leaving now." We turned instantly and started running toward the lobby. But the hallway behind us no longer looked the same. The walls seemed longer. The corridor stretched farther than before. Doorways we never saw earlier now lined both sides. And every single door was slowly opening by itself. The hallway kept changing while we ran. I know how insane that sounds, but I swear the hospital was moving around us. Doors appeared where there weren't any before. Hallways stretched longer every time we looked away. The exit signs above us flickered between different directions, like the building itself was trying to confuse us. "This way!" Daniel shouted. We followed him around another corner, breathing hard, flashlights shaking wildly across the walls. Then we stopped instantly. The hallway ended in a dead wall. We had just come through there seconds ago. Chris turned in circles, panicking. No, no, no. This isn't right. We came from here. Mia low. Oh, close to collapsing now. Tears streamed down her face while she whispered, "The building doesn't want us leaving." "Stop saying that," Chris snapped loudly. But deep down, all of us were starting to believe it. Then came the sound again. Footsteps. Slow this time. Dragging footsteps. Coming from somewhere nearby. Scrape, scrape, scrape. The sound echoed through the darkness behind us. Nobody wanted to turn around first. I forced myself to look. At the far end of the hallway, a figure stood motionless under the flickering ceiling light. A nurse. At least, it looked like a nurse. Old white uniform. Long black hair hanging over her face. One arm bent the wrong way. She wasn't moving, just standing there, watching us. Mia immediately buried her face against my shoulder. "Don't look at it," Chris whispered. "Is that a real person?" Before anyone answered, the hallway lights flickered once. The figure moved closer, not walking, just suddenly closer, like frames missing from a video. The lights flickered again. Closer, another flicker. Now, she stood halfway down the hall. We all backed away instinctively. Daniel raised his camera toward her with shaking hands. "Who are you?" "The nursery." She slowly tilted her head sideways. Then her voice came out, except it wasn't one voice. It sounded like dozens of people speaking together. You shouldn't have opened the files. Every light in the hallway exploded at once. Bang! Darkness swallowed us instantly. Mia screamed. Chris grabbed my arm. "Run!" We took off blindly through the dark corridor while pieces of broken glass crunched under our shoes. Behind us, I could hear footsteps now. Fast footsteps. Not human footsteps. Too fast. Like something crawling across walls and ceilings at the same time. My flashlight barely worked anymore. The beam kept cutting in and out while we stumbled through endless hallways. Then Daniel suddenly stopped. "There!" he shouted. A stairwell door. We slammed through it together and nearly collapsed onto the concrete stairs inside. The heavy metal door shut behind us with a loud boom. For a second, everything became quiet again, except our breathing. Chris leaned against the wall, completely pale. "What the hell was that thing?" Nobody answered, because none of us knew. Daniel checked his camera screen with trembling hands. "I got her on video," he whispered. "You filmed that thing?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "Show me." The four of us crowded around the tiny camera screen inside the dark stairwell. Daniel rewound the footage to the hallway. At first, everything looked normal. The corridor, the flickering lights, us panicking. Then the nurse appeared. But the camera showed something worse than what we saw in real life. The figure wasn't walking on the floor. The figure wasn't walking on the floor. She was hanging upside down from the ceiling. Her limbs twisted unnaturally while she crawled toward us like a spider. Mia immediately looked away and started crying harder. Chris cursed under his breath repeatedly. But the worst part came seconds later, when the camera accidentally captured the hallway behind us. There weren't 4 people standing there. There were 5. Another figure stood directly between us. Tall, thin, completely dark. No face, no features. Just a human-shaped shadow, watching us silently. I felt ice run through my chest. That wasn't there before, I whispered. Daniel slowly paused the video frame. The shadow figure stood inches behind me, its head tilted slightly toward the camera. Then the screen glitched violently. The footage cut out completely. Static filled the speaker, and underneath the sink. "Attic," a voice whispered clearly. "Basement." The stairwell lights instantly shut off. Pitch darkness surrounded us. Then something heavy slammed against the metal door outside. Boom! All 4 of us jumped. Another hit followed immediately. Boom. The entire stairwell door bent inward slightly. Something was trying to get inside. Chris backed up the stairs immediately. "Go, go, go!" We ran upward fast, our footsteps echoing loudly through the stairwell. The banging continued below us, while the metal door shook harder every second. 3rd floor, 4th floor, 5th floor. We finally stopped when we reached another hallway entrance. Daniel pushed the door open carefully. The 5th floor looked different from the rest of the hospital, cleaner. The walls weren't as damaged here. Medical beds still lined the hallways neatly. Some lights even glowed faintly overhead, but the silence felt wrong. Too perfect, like walking into a dream. Chris whispered, "Why does this floor look untouched?" Then we smelled something strange. Burning. Not fire exactly. More like overheated wires and old chemicals. We moved slowly through the hallway, checking every room we passed. Most were empty patient rooms with the rusted equipment and broken monitors. Then Mia suddenly froze again. There's someone there. At the far end of the hall stood a little boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old. He wore hospital clothes and held a stuffed rabbit tightly against his chest. His face looked pale under the dim lights. None of us spoke. The boy simply stared at us silently. Then he smiled. Not a normal smile. Too wide. Way too wide. Chris whispered, "Kid, are you okay?" The boy slowly pointed toward a nearby door labeled surgery wing. Then he spoke softly. "They're waiting for you." The hallway lights flickered. And the little boy disappeared. And the little boy disappeared. The little boy vanished so suddenly that for a second, my brain refused to accept what I had just seen. One blink. That's all it took. He was standing there one moment with that horrible smile on his face. And then nothing. Empty hallway. Dead silence. Mia grabbed my arm so tightly her nails dug into my skin. "We need to get out now." "I agree," Chris said immediately. But Daniel kept staring at the surgery wing door, almost like he was in a trance. "Daniel," I whispered carefully. "Don't." He didn't answer. The dim lights above us buzzed softly while the smell of chemicals grew stronger around the hallway. Somewhere far away inside the hospital, metal scraped against metal again. SCRA. A. 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 P. The sound echoed for several seconds. Then silence returned. Daniel slowly walked toward the surgery wing entrance. "Bro, what are you doing?" Chris asked nervously. "I think this is where everything happened," Daniel muttered. "The disappearances, the files, whatever's in this place, it started here." Mia looked horrified. "Why would you want to go in there?" "Because maybe there's another exit. Even." He didn't sound convinced. The surgery wing doors were old metal push doors with small square windows. One of the windows was cracked badly. Darkness waited on the other side. Daniel pushed the door slowly. The hinges screamed loudly. The second we stepped inside, the temperature dropped again. Not normal cold. This felt dead. Our flashlight beams revealed long surgical hallways lined with operating rooms. Rusted tools still sat on trays. Surgical masks and stained gowns covered the floor like people had abandoned everything in the middle of work. The lights here barely functioned. Some flickered weakly, while others pulsed slow. "Like a heartbeat," Chris whispered. "This place feels wrong." Then we heard it. A child crying. Soft at first, very far away. Mia immediately froze. That's the boy. The crying echoed through the surgery wing hallways. It sounded real, human, hurt. Daniel moved toward the sound instantly. "Hello?" No answer, only crying. I didn't want to follow it. Every instinct in my body screamed that it was bait, but none of us wanted to split up either, so we kept moving deeper inside. The crying grew louder as we passed one operating room after another. Some rooms still had old medical beds inside. Others contained broken machines covered in dust. Then Chris suddenly stopped walking. "Guys," his voice sounded shaky again. He pointed his flashlight into one of the operating rooms nearby. The room looked empty at first. Then I noticed the walls. Photos. Hundreds of photos taped everywhere. Patients. Doctors. Children. Some smiling, some crying, some restrained to hospital beds. The pictures covered every inch of the walls and ceiling. Mia whispered, "Oh my God." Then Daniel stepped closer to one of the photos. I saw his face change immediately, because the new sent photos weren't old. They were recent, very recent. Photos of us, pictures taken earlier that night. Us entering the hospital, us inside the Aka's room, us standing near the elevator. Someone had been watching us the entire time. Chris backed away from the room instantly. "Nope, we are leaving." "Right now." Then the child crying suddenly stopped. Complete silence filled the surgery wing. And in that silence, we heard breathing. Not ours, heavy breathing. Somewhere very close. The lights above us flickered violently. Flash. For 1 second, the hallway ahead was empty. Flash. A tall figure now stood at the far end. Flash. Closer. Flash. Closer again. Its body looked unnaturally thin beneath a doctor's coat. Its arms hung too long at its sides. The face remained hidden in darkness. The lights stopped flickering. The figure disappeared. Chris whispered, "Did you guys see that?" Before anyone answered, a loudspeaker crackled overhead. Static exploded through the hallways. Then an old man's voice spoke calmly through the speakers. "Patients have arrived," the speakers screeched painfully. "Prepare operating room 3. Mia started sobbing immediately. Telly. Please, let's go." Then every operating room door around us slowly opened at the same time. Kriak. The sound echoed endlessly through the wing. Darkness filled every room. Darkness filled every room. And from inside those rooms, people began whispering. Dozens of voices. Soft laughing, crying, muttering, some calling our names. I felt pure panic rising inside my chest now. "Run!" Chris shouted. We sprinted through the hallway fast, while the whispers grew louder behind us. The lights burst one by one overhead as we passed beneath them. Pop, pop, pop. Glass shattered everywhere. Something started moving in the operating rooms beside us. Fast movement, shapes crossing past the windows. One room suddenly slammed shut beside me so hard the walls shook. Another room exploded with loud banging from inside. Then Mia screamed. I turned instantly. She was gone, completely gone. 1 second she was running beside me. The next second, nothing. We all stopped immediately. "MIA?" Daniel yelled. No response. The hallway stretched empty behind us. Chris panicked instantly. "Where did she go?" "I don't know." We searched frantically with our flashlights, shouting her name. Me over and over. But the surgery wing seemed quieter now. Too quiet. Then we heard Mia's voice. Faint, coming from nearby. "Help me." Daniel immediately ran toward the sound. "Wait," I shouted. "Too late." He disappeared around the corner ahead of us. Chris and I chased after him fast, turning into another surgical hallway. Empty. Daniel was gone too. The lights above us buzzed weakly, while the smell of chemicals became overwhelming now. "Daniel!" I shouted. Nothing. Then Chris grabbed my shoulder hard. "Look." At the end of the hallway stood a wheelchair. Mia's camera sat inside it, still recording. I slowly walked closer, my heart hammering so hard it hurt. The camera screen flickered with static. Then the image cleared. It showed Mia standing alone in a dark room crying. She kept whispering, "They won't let me leave." Then someone behind her whispered softly, "She belongs to us now." Mia turned around screaming. The video cut to black instantly, right as the camera died. We heard Mia scream somewhere deep below us in the hospital. Coming from the basement. Mia's scream echoed up from the basement. Like she was being dragged somewhere far underground. Then silence. Absolute silence. Chris stared at me with pure panic in his eyes. "We can't go down there." But even as he said it, we both knew we didn't have a choice. Daniel and Mia were gone. And the basement was the only place left. The hospital suddenly groaned around us again. Somewhere deep inside the walls, pipes rattled loudly. The flickering lights overhead dimmed lower and lower, until the surgery wing was barely visible. Then the loudspeaker crackled once more. "Procedure beginning in 5 minutes. Static screamed through the halls. "Please escort the patients downstairs," Chris whispered. "Patients?" I grabbed Mia's camera from the wheelchair and checked the battery. Somehow, it still worked even though every other device kept dying inside the hospital. The screen flickered weakly, and for half a second, I saw someone standing behind us in the reflection. Tall, motionless, watching. I spun around instantly. Nothing there. Nothing there. My chest felt tight now. Every breath hurt. "We need to move," I whispered. We ran back through the surgery wing as fast as we could. The hallways looked darker than before. Shadows stretched strangely across the walls like TH. They were moving on their own. Then we heard the elevator bell again. Ding. Chris froze. "No." The elevator door stood open at the end of the hallway. waiting. The same red emergency light glowed inside. But now, there was something written across the back wall of the elevator in fresh black letters. Come home. Chris shook his head immediately. We are not getting in that thing. Before I could answer, Mia screamed again, closer this time. Definitely from below us. Help me! Chris cursed loudly. Fine! We rushed into the elevator together. The second we stepped inside, the doors slammed shut behind us violently. Bang! The elevator began descending immediately. No buttons pressed. No controls touched. The old cables above us groaned loudly, while the elevator shook beneath our feet. The red light flickered non-stop, making the small space feel alive somehow. Chris breathed heavily beside me. This is a nightmare. Then the elevator suddenly stopped, not smoothly. Hard. The lights went out instantly. Pitch black. I heard breathing again. Not ours. Something else was inside the elevator with us. Very close. Chris whispered shakily. Do you hear that? The breathing sounded wet and uneven, like damaged lungs struggling to work. I reached for my flashlight. Before I could turn it on, a voice whispered directly beside my ear. Don't let him see you. I nearly screamed. The flashlight clicked on instantly. The elevator was empty again, but the walls had changed. Hospital gowns now hung from hooks, covering every side of the elevator. Dirty old gowns swayed slightly, even though nothing touched them, and written across each gown in dark letters, patient. The elevator started moving again, lower, lower, lower. Then the floor indicator changed from numbers to words. Surgery morgue isolation, the final word appeared slowly. Admission ding. The elevator doors creaked open. The basement looked nothing like the rest of the hospital. It was cleaner, not abandoned. The lights worked perfectly here, glowing pale white above spotless floors. Medical equipment lined the walls neatly. Monitors beeped softly, somewhere nearby. But there were no doctors, no nurses, no people, just silence. Chris stepped out first, staring around in horror. How is this possible? I followed slowly, gripping the flashlight tightly. The cement hallway stretched endlessly ahead of us. Every door here was marked with patient numbers instead of names. Room 104, room 105, room 106, and then I noticed something that made my stomach twist. One door read, room 110 Mia Carter. Chris saw it too. Oh my God! We rushed toward the room, instantly. The door stood slightly open. Inside was a hospital bed. Mia sat on the edge of it perfectly still. Her head hung downward so her hair covered her face. Mia! I shouted. No movement. Chris stepped closer carefully. Mia, are you okay? Very slowly. She raised her head. Her eyes looked wrong. Completely black. Not like possession in movies. Worse, empty. Like there was nobody inside her anymore. Then she smiled, way too wide. You came back, she whispered softly. Chris backed away immediately. That's not Mia. The lights in the room flickered once, and suddenly, Mia was standing right in front of Chris. I swear she crossed the room without moving. Chris screamed and stumbled backward into the hallway. Mia's voice changed instantly. Multiple voices speaking together again. He wants to meet you now. Every hospital room door. In the basement, Sud. Only opened at once. Kriak. Patients stepped out slowly into the hallway. Dozens of them. Men, women, children. All wearing hospital gowns. All pale and silent. Some looked burned. Others looked painfully thin. A few had blackened eyes, just like Mia. But none of them walked normally. Their movements jerked unnaturally like broken puppets. Chris whispered, Run! The patients began turning toward us together. Then every single one smiled. We ran, fast as we could. The basement hallway seemed endless while the patients followed behind us slowly. They didn't chase, didn't scream. They just walked. And somehow, that felt worse. The overhead speakers crackled again. Doctor waiting in operating theater. A loud metallic door suddenly opened ahead of us by itself. Bright surgical lights glowed inside. I saw Daniel sitting in a chair at the center of the room. Strapped down, his head hung low. Daniel, I shouted. He lifted his face slowly. Tears streamed down his cheeks. They made me watch, he whispered. Chris rushed toward him instantly. That's when the surgical lights above us shut off one by one. Darkness swallowed the room slowly, until only one L. Right remained, the operating table, and standing beside it, someone tall wearing an old doctor's mask, completely still, watching us. The masked doctor didn't move, not even slightly. He just stood beside the operating table, under that single, hanging light, while darkness swallowed the rest of the room around him. I could hear my own heartbeat, pounding inside my ears. Daniel was still strapped tightly to the chair in the center of the room, breathing fast, tears running down his face. Chris rushed toward him immediately, trying to pull the restraints loose. "They won't come off," Chris shouted. The leather straps looked old and cracked, but somehow they wouldn't break. Then the doctor finally moved, one slow step forward. That's all. But the moment his shoe touched the floor, every monitor inside the room suddenly turned on at once. Beep. Static flickered across dozens of old screens mounted along the walls. And every screen showed the same thing. Us. Live footage of us standing in that room. Different camera angles. Different corners. Like the hospital had been recording us the entire night. Chris looked around in horror. "How many cameras are in this place?" "Ace?" The doctor tilted his head slowly. Then he spoke. His voice sounded calm. "Too calm. You were expected." The overhead surgical light above Daniel began swinging gently back and forth. I noticed something hanging from the ceiling behind the doctor. Patient tags. Hundreds of them. Old faded hospital tags dangling from strings like decorations. And every few seconds, they softly clicked together. Tick, tick, tick. The sound made my skin crawl. Daniel suddenly started panicking harder. "Don't let him touch me." Chris pulled harder on the restraints. "I'm trying." The doctor took another slow step forward. Still no face visible behind the old surgical mask. Only darkness beneath it. Then the monitors around us changed again. Now they showed old hospital footage. Black and white security recordings. Doctors wheeling patients through hallways. Children crying inside rooms. People being dragged toward the basement. And standing in every single video, the same masked doctor, watching silently. I whispered, "What is this place?" The doctor answered immediately, "A hospital for the forgotten." His voice echoed strangely, almost layered with other voices. Underneath, underneath. Broken minds, broken souls. They came here to be healed. The lights flickered violently, and they stayed dot suddenly. Every screen flashed static again. Then the footage changed to Mia. She sat alone in a dark room, somewhere inside the hospital, staring directly into the camera. Her expression looked completely empty now. "She's still alive," I whispered. Chris looked toward the screen instantly. "MIA!" She slowly smiled at the camera, then whispered softly, "He's behind you." The monitors died instantly. Every light in the room exploded. Darkness swallowed everything. Chris screamed. I heard metal crashing somewhere nearby, followed by Daniel yelling in panic. Then footsteps. Fast footsteps circling around us inside the darkness. Not normal footsteps. Too fast. Like something running on all fours. I grabbed my flashlight with shaking hands and turned it on. The beam landed directly on the operating table. The doctor was gone. Daniel's restraints hung open. The chair sat empty. "Daniel," I shouted. No answer. Then Chris suddenly pointed upward. I looked slowly and nearly collapsed. The doctor clung upside down to the ceiling directly above us. His limbs bent unnaturally while his head tilted sideways beneath the mask, watching us. The flashlight flickered violently. Then the doctor dropped from the ceiling. Chris grabbed me instantly, and we ran. The operating room doors slammed open ahead of us, while alarms screamed throughout the basement. RED emergency lights flooded the hallways. The entire hospital felt alive now. Doors open and shut by themselves. Patient voices whispered from every direction, some laughing, some crying, some begging us not to leave. We sprinted through the basement, searching desperately for the elevator, but the hallways no longer made sense. Rooms kept changing numbers. Corridors twisted into dead ends. Then we heard Daniel scream somewhere nearby, "Help me!" Chris immediately turned toward the sound. We found him at the end of another hallway, lying on the floor, near a doorway marked. Discharge's face looked pale with terror. "Get up," Chris shouted. Daniel stared at us with wide eyes. It knows us now. What? The hospital, he whispered. It doesn't let people leave. The lights overhead burst one after another toward us down the hallway. Pop, pop, pop. Darkness raced closer. Something was coming, fast. Chris grabbed Daniel's arm and forced him up. Move! We ran again, while screams echoed behind us through the basement. Then suddenly, we saw daylight, very faint daylight, shining through distant glass doors. The hospital exit. For the first time all night, hope hit me. We sprinted toward the doors as fast as possible. The voices behind us became louder instantly, angrier. The entire hospital shook violently around us. The whispers turned into screaming. Don't leave. Stay with US. Come back. The exit doors suddenly tried slamming shut on their own. Chris threw himself forward and caught one before it closed completely. Go, go, go! Daniel stumbled through first. I followed immediately behind him. Chris pushed through last, then something grabbed him from the darkness behind us. Hard. Chris screamed and slammed against the floor. I turned around just in time to see dozens of pale hands dragging him backward across the hospital floor. Help me! I grabbed his arm instantly. Daniel grabbed my shoulder. We pulled with everything we had, while Chris screamed in terror. But the hands kept dragging him. Deeper into the darkness. More hands appeared. Too many hands, stretching unnaturally from the shadows. Chris looked directly at me, his face completely broken with fear. Then he screamed the words I still hear every night. Don't let them take me. The lights exploded again. Darkness swallowed him instantly, and the hands pulled him away. Gone. Just gone. The hospital suddenly became silent, dead silent. Daniel and I stumbled outside into the freezing morning air, while the sun slowly rose behind the trees. The front doors of St. Mercy Hospital stood open quietly behind us, like nothing had happened. No screams, no voices, nothing. We stayed there for almost 10 minutes, shaking and crying in the parking lot, before finally getting into the truck. Neither of us spoke during the drive home. Neither of us spoke during the drive home. We couldn't, because deep down, we both knew Chris was never coming back. Police searched the hospital later that afternoon. They found nothing. No basement, no operating rooms, no patient records, no signs of Mia or Chris anywhere inside. The police said the building was empty, completely abandoned. But Daniel and I know what we saw, and sometimes late at night. I still get notifications from the cloud account connected to Mia's camera. Short video uploads, always recorded inside dark hospital hallways, always silent, except for the very end, where a familiar voice whispers softly into the camera, "Come back."